Hello and welcome to Forum. Today we're discussing a very serious issue indeed, the continuing conflict in Syria. According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the death toll since the uprising began in March 2011 has reached well over 15,000. There are signs of the conflict spilling over into Lebanon, while Turkey has warned Syria that it's changed the rules of engagement since Syrian anti-aircraft fire brought down one of its warplanes in what Ankara claims was international airspace. And yet the regime of President Bashar al-Assad continues with the apparent support of Russia, China and neighbouring Iran. Partly it's a religious conflict. President Assad and his inner circle are from the minority Alawite sect, loosely linked to Shia Islam, but viewed as heretics by Sunnis, who make up the vast majority, incidentally, of Syria's population. Russia is still supplying the regime with weapons. Some Arab and Western countries are arming the rebels who hold swathes of territories but aren't really united. So let me introduce my guests. Firstly, on my left, I'm pleased to welcome Professor Pierre Piccinin, a professor of history and political sciences at the Free University of Leuven in Belgium. He has in the past accused Western media of misleading the public, often overestimating the size of protests, for instance, but he has himself been arrested and tortured while visiting Syria and is now very critical of the Damascus government. Next to him, British Liberal Democrat MEP Sir Graham Watson, who has said that as the Annan peace plan appears to be dead, more vigorous action is needed from the EU, among others. Facing him, another MEP, Belgian socialist Veronique de Keyser, who's called for the EU to send humanitarian assistance to the Syrian people and to take a tough line with Assad. And finally, I'm pleased to welcome Nicolas Beguer, director of Amnesty International Europe, which has accused the Assad regime of crimes against humanity. In a moment, we're going to hear a brief interview with Dr. Kamal al-Labwani, a Syrian doctor and artist and a prominent member of the opposition who spent several years in prison because of that. But first, I want a very brief feel of the situation as it is on the ground from each of our guests. Let's start with Professor Pierre Piccinin. For the ordinary Syrians, I'm not talking about the Free Syrian Army or the Assad people, but the ordinary Syrians, what is life like? Just briefly.
Je rectifie juste l'information. Au départ, je n'enseigne pas à l'Université de Louvain, à l'école européenne. C'est une erreur qui était parue après au moment de mon arrestation. Donc, pour les gens, disons, en Syrie, actuellement, il y a eu un grand changement à partir des élections du 7 mai. Non seulement sur le plan économique, il y a des difficultés de plus en plus grandes. Et entre mes deux précédents voyages et le dernier que j'ai fait en mai à Damas, j'ai vu vraiment la différence. Les gens souffrent économiquement, donc ils ont perdu confiance dans leur gouvernement. Et d'autre part, ils sont complètement déçus par les élections du 7 mai, où une partie de la population qui soutenait encore le régime a compris que ce régime avait décidé de se maintenir par la terreur et la force.
Sir Graham, now then, what do you see as the situation for ordinary Syrians, and what can the EU do to help?
Well, of course, it varies very much across the country. There are some towns and villages that have hardly been touched by this conflict, but those that have are in a terrible state. The temperatures are now over 40 degrees much of the time. There are people without electricity, so the air conditioning systems don't work for those that had them in the first place. There are shortages of water. The situation is bad, in addition to which, as Amnesty International have said, we've seen crimes against humanity committed. We've not only seen government-backed thugs going out and killing people at random. We've seen even children, by some accounts used as human shields, by many accounts mistreated, even tortured. The situation really is grim, and that is why I believe that we've reached the point where we have to accept our responsibility to protect under United Nations doctrine and do something about it.
Veronique de Keyser, you've said before that you feel that the EU should be providing humanitarian aid for the Syrian people. How would that actually be physically possible, given the attitude of Assad's troops and the fact that the borders are not easy to penetrate?
C'est toute la difficulté. Apparemment, Assad a accepté l'intervention de la Croix-Rouge maintenant et quelques points humanitaires dans le pays. Mais ce qui est important pour nous, Union européenne, c'est de soutenir, en tout cas, du point de vue humanitaire, mais du point de vue simplement des médicaments, du point de vue des possibilités d'avoir un peu d'argent, cette opposition civile, j'entends bien, qui quadrille réellement le pays et qui s'est organisée en dehors de tout le Conseil national syrien et qui, elle-même, essaye de récolter des fonds, essaye de faire des hôpitaux à la maison, avec un rôle important des femmes, etc. Et on a l'impression que ça, c'est la vraie opposition et que c'est celle-là qu'il faudrait avoir. Alors on essaye par des canaux détournés, il y a quelques ONG qui ont encore des circuits, il y a des réfugiés qui sont venus ici, comme Samarias Bek de la société civile, qui a gardé des canaux avec les femmes avec lesquelles elle travaillait, et ce sont vraiment des voies un petit peu détournées, mais c'est là l'espoir de ce changement en Syrie dont parlait la Bouani.
Nicholas Begger, Amnesty has just recently criticised the Assad regime for killing, well, certainly 3 doctors, we don't know who the 4th body belonged to, torturing and killing medics who are actually helping ordinary Syrians, protesters who've been injured by Assad's troops. I mean, the situation for people there is becoming intolerable, presumably.
Absolutely intolerable. We've just published another report. We've had a researcher in the country for about 2 months. We've mainly documented in the Aleppo and Idlib areas. The things we've documented are atrocious. They are clearly crimes against humanity. In fact, they're also war crimes in parts. For example, the army would, shell a city and then just march in, go from house to house, pull all the male inhabitants out, including children as old as 10 years, and just shoot them in front of their house door and let them lie there, or just burn the bodies afterwards. They're indiscriminately burning houses without any evidence that there were weapons or anything else, destroying people's property, making them live in impossible conditions, and torture is rife. We've created a whole list of the most used torture. We've interviewed people who have survived it. It's atrocious. One doesn't want to even mention these things because it's just too horrible to imagine. Something has to be done, and it has to be done immediately. The situation is just impossible, and we need at least a referral to the International Criminal Court immediately, and we need help. There are about 1.5 million people now in danger who need urgent humanitarian assistance.
Okay, well, before we continue with the debate, let's have a look now at this little interview with Dr. Kamal Al-Labwani, who's a known opposition member, a leading figure in the opposition, who has visited the European Parliament.
I hope the international society put good pressure or big pressure on the regime, cruel regime, which killed his people. I think we have to ask help from you because we need this help. The regime of Syria have supported from Russia and from Iran, and we cannot fight this regime without your help. I really thank the efforts which put the pressure to ceasefire. I ask this parliament to make a big project for Middle East, for reform, for changing in Middle East. It's a chance to change. It is not kind of a crisis. We have to stop it as soon as possible. No, we have to give a chance to change. And we pay the price for freedom, and we need to achieve this freedom. I ask for big project, for reform in politics, in economy, in culture. Yes, we need to be good partner, good friend to you. This is my message.
Professor Piccinin, if I can come to you first, how much control do you feel Bashar al-Assad actually has? Is it just him, or is he himself, in a sense, within the control of the regime that surrounds him?
Alors je pense que Bachar al-Assad n'est pas le pire du régime. On a eu le printemps de Damas en 2000-2001 qui a montré que quand il a remplacé son père à Fès, il y a eu une tentative d'ouverture, de modernisation du régime bassiste. Mais il est entouré d'une équipe très importante. Son frère Maher, d'ailleurs, est également un des grands caciques du régime et peut-être plus radical que lui. Donc je pense qu'il est, on dit souvent, l'otage de son équipe, et je crois effectivement qu'il aimerait peut-être réformer en partie le système, mais qu'il l'en est empêché.
You yourself, when you were there last, were arrested. You were trapped, in fact, by the Air Force police and tortured. You were held for 6 days. I mean, this must have been a terrifying, awful experience.
Personnellement, je n'ai pas été très fortement torturé. J'ai juste été interrogé violemment. Je n'oserais pas dire que j'ai été torturé en comparaison de ce que j'ai vu, parce que j'étais d'abord dans le centre de Homs, des services secrets de Homs avant d'être transféré dans le centre de l'Air Force à Damas. Et pendant toute une nuit, j'ai été vraiment face à face à la torture, donc des gens qui étaient attachés dans le couloir juste à côté de là où moi j'étais attaché. Je voyais tout ce qui se passait pendant de longs moments où la porte de la chambre où je me trouvais est restée ouverte. Et effectivement, donc, je pense qu'on est face à une... Les tortionnaires ne posaient même pas de questions à ces gens, c'est véritablement de la torture dissuasive. Ensuite, on rend les cadavres ou les gens encore vivants, mais complètement démolis à leur famille. Et dans le quartier, bon, plus personne n'ose bouger.
Did this effectively change your view a little bit of the Assad regime? Because you have been critical of the Western media for being slightly biased, you might say, against the regime.
Je n'ai pas changé de point de vue essentiellement à cause des tortures. Évidemment, sur le plan émotionnel, je ne peux pas nier que j'ai eu un choc, mais je crois surtout que les élections du 7 mai ont été un grand changement dans le pays. Quand j'y étais allé en juillet ou en décembre ou en janvier, il y avait encore un certain support au gouvernement, mais par des gens qui espéraient une réforme réelle des institutions. Et les élections du 7 mai ont montré que le régime n'avait absolument pas d'intention de changer. C'est l'opposition traditionnelle de toujours, l'opposition officielle qui était représentée. Tous les autres, comme le CNS, étaient considérés comme mouvement terroriste inéligible. Et donc la population s'est réveillée avec ces élections. Et aujourd'hui, je crois qu'elle est très majoritairement contre le régime.
Veronique de Keyser, Russia remains implacably opposed to the idea of the UN taking any sort of sanctions. They say that they're afraid of the sort of chaos descending that we did see in Libya with the NATO intervention there. Of course, they also have naval access to the port at Tartus, which is also where the Alawite sect normally live. It's in the coastal region. How much of this is just self-interest and how much is an attempt to prop up an old ally?
C'est un peu un mélange de tout ça. C'est vrai qu'il y a une possibilité de chaos, indéniablement, parce que Bachar al-Assad a très habilement poussé en avant les différences confessionnelles qui, auparavant, n'existaient pas telles quelles en Syrie. C'est vraiment fabriqué de toutes pièces. Et donc, on a une influence de puissance internationale à l'intérieur qui arment, qui envoient des armes et qui veulent grignoter, évidemment, l'influence de la Russie, de l'Iran sur le pays. C'est absolument indéniable et on transforme ça en conflit sunnite-chiite. Mais au-delà de ça, il y a des solutions qui maintenant apparaissent pour calmer le jeu et qui, moi, me plaisent pas énormément, c'est-à-dire un régime transitoire découpé confessionnellement, un peu comme on a eu au Liban avec les accords de Taïf en disant il faut un alaouite comme président et puis il faudra un premier ministre sunnite, etc., etc. Et je pense que ça ne traduit pas ce que les gens voulaient. Et quand vous écoutez Labouani, et on ne l'a pas entendu là-dedans, et moi je le connais depuis près de 10 ans, j'ai rencontré Bachar al-Assad plusieurs fois, et chaque fois il me parlait de réformes. Je pense qu'aujourd'hui vous avez raison, les gens en ont marre. Ils en ont marre, mais ils ont peur. Ils ont peur à cause des systèmes de terreur. Et Labouani, quand je disais, mais qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour vous aider, Labouani? Et il me disait, ce que vous devez dire maintenant, c'est que Bachar, c'est fini. Parce que les gens se disent que peut-être ça va durer. Et que si on dit très fermement, c'est vraiment l'arme la plus importante, c'est fini. Et il faut déjà instruire des dossiers avec des témoignages pour préparer la Cour pénale internationale. Il faut que les gens qui ont peur aujourd'hui sachent que ça ne va pas durer. Et il y aura des défections, et il commence à y en avoir d'ailleurs, vous l'avez vu, et avec des défections de masse et les sanctions économiques qui ont fait mal, il faut le dire, on pourrait arriver à une solution politique où la Russie finirait par admettre, pour autant qu'elle ait des garanties sur sa zone d'influence à elle. Mais la solution ne peut être que politique.
Graham Watson, if Assad is not in complete control, in a sense if the people around him are to a certain degree controlling him, telling him game over isn't going to make any difference because his acolytes, if you like, or the people around him are going to want to stay in control because they'd be terrified of an overchange of regime because of what might happen to them because of the International Criminal Court and the risk of prosecution.
Indeed, I think it's very hard to see any voluntary stepping down, certainly at this moment. But what is clear is that within the last month, the opposition have become much better organized. The Free Syrian Army, which did not have really the backing of various other opposition groups, has it increasingly. We saw about 3 weeks ago 100 soldiers defect with their equipment to the Free Syrian Army. I think there is a recognition on the side of the opposition that they need to be better organized. They are beginning to control some parts of the territory. The stakes look very different now from the case a month ago. Moreover, despite the fact that the so-called action group, the inappropriately named action group of the United Nations is meeting, I think also it is becoming harder to defend, A, the idea that there can be a negotiated solution in any easy way, and B, the idea that the West will not need to intervene at all. We've used the Chinese and Russian vetoes as a very easy get-out clause, if you like. There is no appetite for intervention, but in the end, there will have to be intervention because the world will demand it and the Syrian people are calling for it.
Nicholas Beguer, we hear quite a lot as well about the Shabia, these militia groups within Syria on the side of the Assad regime, but they're actually doing some of the dirty work on the ground. I mean, who are these people and what is their role in all of this from your perspective?
Well, what we've documented is that we can say that the great majority of the violations that are happening are being committed either by the army or by the Shabia, which are government-backed.
They're basically just non-uniform thugs, aren't they?
Yes,
basically?
exactly. But they're being financed and controlled probably by the government. So, but we have some human rights violations also documented by the Free Syrian Army, but the balance is different. Obviously, none of them are okay. But for example, we are clearly calling for a complete stop of arms transfer to the Syrian government. This has to stop immediately. This cannot go on because they're being used for gross human rights violations and they're being used for crimes against humanity. That's proven, that's documented, so it has to stop. I guess one of the areas that is also important that people need to imagine what's happening there is that anybody who's been violated either by the Shabia or by the army, shot or injured, I mean they indiscriminately fire into demonstrations, killing bystanders, killing children, killing women and men who are peacefully protesting unarmed. And we've documented, we've been there, we've seen it happen. And then if people are injured, they cannot go to a normal hospital because the doctors there will torture them in the hospital and won't treat them. So people are setting up, field hospitals are helping out, young medical students are helping out. And as we've just seen, we've just documented from yesterday, they get taken and then killed. Yes, some of them are not uniformed, and the Assad regime keeps pretending these are terrorists, but our documentation seems to show that that is absolutely not the case.
Assad has said that there are a number of foreign forces. His country is at war with foreign troops. How many other foreign countries do you think might actually be involved here? Because I mean, quite apart from those who may be on the side of the Free Syrian Army, it seems as if Assad himself, it's been suggested, has Iranians in fighting on his side. I mean, is there evidence of other people fighting their wars on Syria's territory?
Well, I mean, we've mainly looked at the documenting side of things and looking at the human rights violations that are happening rather than kind of filming the army as such, which is a very dangerous thing to do, given also that we were in the country not with the government's permission. I think for us the key thing is to try and collect all of, as Veronique de Keyser just said, collect all of the evidence with a view to getting justice, because I think the people, you know, we've interviewed a mother who has just lost all three of her sons and her husband in one strike that just came in and just killed them. And these people will want justice, and if there's ever going to be peace in this country, no matter who is there and helping at the moment, it's people, it's the Syrians who will need to know that one day there will be justice for the violations that has happened to them.
We've got very little time left. Just come around you all briefly, if you could just say how you see this ending in just a few words. Professor Piccedin.
En quelques mots, c'est difficile, mais disons que voilà, actuellement, sur le plan militaire, le régime reprend progressivement les bastions de l'opposition. Talbicher, Rastan sont en train d'être bombardés. Homs s'est presque vidé de sa résistance. Sur le plan policier, le régime qui maintenant sait qu'il est soutenu par la Russie et que l'Occident n'intervient pas, a mis les vitesses supérieures pour éviter, après les élections et le changement d'opinion publique, que la révolte ne commence dans les grandes villes. Donc, si on n'intervient pas militairement, si on ne donne pas des armes, vous savez, en 30 secondes, j'ai vu l'armée syrienne libre à plusieurs reprises. Ils n'ont que des kalachnikovs, quelques bazookas, des grenades à main. On ne leur fournit pas d'armes. Ils sont démunis. Si on ne fait rien, dans quelques mois, le régime aura repris le contrôle total du pays par la terreur et avec l'appui de l'Iran, de la Chine, de la Russie, dans les années qui viendront, survivra le temps de retrouver des relations normales avec la communauté internationale.
Sir Graham Watson, is there any sort of way to avoid that? That sounds like a terrible scenario.
Unfortunately, all the scenarios that we can see look bad. There is certainly no easy way out of this situation. I think what is going to be needed is very close cooperation between the countries of the West, Turkey, and the countries of the Gulf, because it's the countries of the Gulf who have been helping the Free Syrian Army with light arms, can go on providing them assistance. Turkey clearly is a major military player in the area, and we need to work very closely together with these countries to try to force a solution.
Véronique de Keyser?
Deux choses. D'abord, je reprendrai ce que Labouani a dit. Il a dit « Je n'espérais pas voir ça ». Quand il est venu au Parlement, je n'espérais pas voir ça dans ma vie et il y a pour moi un formidable espoir. Donc je pense que c'est cette note d'espoir qu'il faut garder. Deuxième point, je dirais, quoi qu'on fasse, il faudrait le faire à l'intérieur de l'ONU. Le fait que l'avion turc ait été abattu, la Turquie faisant partie de l'OTAN, a été un moment extrêmement dangereux où effectivement l'OTAN aurait pu agir seul. Je ne pense pas que ce serait au niveau de la paix du monde une bonne solution que d'en arriver à bypasser le Conseil de sécurité de l'ONU.
And finally, Nicholas Beger, it's difficult, but do you see any hope for the Syrian people? Is there an end in sight here at all?
There has to be an end in sight very soon because what's happening there is absolutely atrocious. I think we need an immediate referral to the ICC. There's no doubt we need an arms embargo. Russia has to stop delivering arms. And we need to have the UN mission given a mandate to monitor human rights because we need the documentation. We need people to feel that the justice can be had. And we need a situation eventually where the Syrian people can democratically make their choices, where they have freedom of assembly, freedom of demonstration. They need to be able to express themselves, and then we can see a change that will be ordered and non-violent, which is what is needed.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. My thanks to all my guests, Professor Pierre Pichinin, Sir Graham Watson, Véronique de Keyser and Nicholas Beger, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.